Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the next installment of Dan's Astrology. Today, it is the 4th day of September. Mercury is Cazimi, or at least going to be Cazimi soon. What does that mean? Cazimi is a critical stage of the synodic cycle where a retrograde planet crosses paths with the sun and finds itself in the heart of the sun. Now, the planet Mercury in this position is especially significant because it's in the sign of Virgo, which is the exaltation of Mercury. And when it comes to another planet, if another planet was in this position in another sign, it would be like the planet was being deconstructed, right? Being torn apart, going through a death rebirth process, and then coming out this other side kind of new and reborn with the dross burnt off and all of that, right? But when Mercury is in Virgo, Mercury has both, for some reason, both domicile dignity and exaltation dignity. And even just having, it's like, let's say it was another planet like Venus and Pisces where it would just be exalted. Just having exaltation on its own is enough to consider the planet protected from combustion by the sun. And so Mercury basically is going through this process completely protected from the negative side of being combusted by the sun. And not only that, but doubly so. And now it's going to be in the state of empowerment, which, if this was a different planet and different sign, it would be like going through a deconstructive death rebirth and being weakened, and then having a moment of being kind of recharged, having new life being breathed into the planet. But with Mercury in both domicile and exaltation dignity, it's just like, I'm not sure what to say exactly, but I have taken this in my own, whether or not you want to take me as a good example or not, I have basically decided that this is a time where instead of, I'm just going to do things like record astrology videos every day and without really even maybe having that much of an idea of what I'm going to say, because the planet Mercury is just so damn well dignified, I can just open my mouth and talk and brilliant things will just come out of it, basically, right? I don't even have to that's how good of a transit this is, right? So, with that in mind, I'm gonna look at some of the things going on. I have to also admit that taking this approach that I was of just making videos and just running my mouth and talking shit, it may not always be such a good idea, but it's at least a time where I can take some chances with it, and one of those things that I was doing a while back, around the time of the full moon in Pisces, I made a video about Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. Now, if you think about Pisces, the water element, Saturn standing for something that is about limitations, obstacles, difficulties, lessons in maturity and adulthood, and stuff like that. And Neptune having to do with intoxication, with the blurring of boundaries, with the kind of infantile attachments to the mother, to toxic codependency and all this kind of stuff. There's something going on where I was feeling a lot of pressure, perhaps, to grow up, to mature, to become more adult, especially with the Saturn being the planet of maturity, transiting a sensitive point in my chart in the first decan of Pisces. I was made a video where I was basically just expressing some stuff, right? And, I was expressing this sort of urge for maturity, for manhood, for empowerment, and stuff like that. But one of the things that I've been noticing is the whole idea of grounding, right? Of being grounded into your local environment, of seeing yourself as a part of the general area that you live in, and being in tune with the cultural psyche of the area, right? And so I'm starting to maybe differentiate that some of these kinds of influences around adulthood and maturity and what it means to be a man may not really be my own internalized belief system, but rather the psyche of the area, the collect, or maybe I'm just too. But what is astrology for, anyways? But illuminating the shadows of the collective psyche, right? So one of the things that I thought I would just follow up on and tell you about is that after making this video where I was talking about, the urge to mature, the urge to be a man, to be responsible and adult, this was the moon was in Pisces that I recorded this video. And then after this, the moon moves into Aries, which is, of course, a Mars-ruled sign, the god of war, and Mars has ingressed now into Libra, so there's a opposition between the moon in Aries and the ruler of Aries, Mars, in Libra, and this astrological dynamic was heralded by the sounds of gunshots. And do not be alarmed, because this isn't gang warfare. This was hunting season in the the lower mainland where I live. This is the opening of duck hunting season. Then people shooting duck, and so I realized that there's a massive buildup of and discharge of masculine energy of young men proving themselves to be men by killing animals, by hunting ducks, and probably, I hope these men are now barbecuing their ducks, Peking style, because that, what can I say about that? But like that was one of the, now that the initial wave of going out there with your shotgun and your Labrador and Retriever and killing animals, now that has been, it's dissipated a lot of this sort of like masculine energy to be mature and to not be a pussy, and so that's kind of cooled off in the general psyche of the but this is the whole thing, though, is that not to set myself up as being this is the kind of thing that I'm kind of running into, though, is the kind of thing of what you might call the local redneck culture, and I don't want to say that in such a derogatory way, but there is an association with duck hunting and rednecks. But there's something about this point that I was talking about. One of the things I was struggling with basically is that in our, the pressure is maybe off a little bit now that Mars moved through that opposition with Neptune and is now in Libra, that we have a bit of air going on, right? But we had a fully stacked Earth element, a grand Earth trine, if you will, right? And one of the things that I personally struggle with as somebody who only has one planet in an Earth sign, and that planet being Neptune, standing for a kind of a clumsy discoordination and lack of motor reflex and general ineptitude with the Earth element, there's some kind of problem with that I have personally with this idea of the Earth element, and there's something about it that I thought was very well illustrated in the current events, that I imagine some of my viewers, some of my followers may be familiar with the festival Burning Man. Personally, I've never been to Burning Man. I only have a remote kind of contact with the kinds of people who associate themselves as burners, per se. And I may have, have some exposure to those circles, but I am generally an outsider, so I kind of look on from a distance with puzzlement and amusement. But one of the things that I can relate to anyways, you may have heard anyways that there was a torrential downpour at Burning Man, and the floods and the waters have caused a massive quagmire kind of situation where a lot of people are stuck in the mud at Burning Man, right? And this, this is one of these things where we were having a Mercury retrograde, we were having a Venus retrograde, and Mercury is retrograding in Virgo, which is the sign that is opposite to the Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. And I think a lot of this kind of thing that I have been feeling, the thing too, though, I have to say, is that I do believe in this sort of thing of not that, you can be young at heart, you can be a wild and crazy artist into your older years, you can be an old person and go to Burning Man and all this, but I still feel this kind of cultural moment where, if you read the happenings going on, like the massive flood at Burning Man. And, you know, my mother, who's never been to Burning Man, but she is of the opinion that Burning Man's probably past its prime, you know. But this whole thing that there's something about the grand Earth trine and these oppositions that were happening with Mars and Neptune, between Virgo and Pisces, and this Mercury retrograde in Virgo, and the Saturn and Neptune and all this kind of stuff. And I was struggling with this whole thing about, you know, this need to be practical, this need to be mature, this need to be grounded. And it reminds me very much, you know, because like I said, I never went to Burning Man, I was never part of that scene, but I did find myself, at one point in time in my life, I found myself in this strange place called Australia, right? And in Australia, they do things a bit differently than they do around here in British Columbia, right? They listen to a strange form of music called Psytrance, and they have, instead of having these big massive festivals that you have to pay 300, 400, 500, maybe even if you want to do luxury glamping, you have to pay thousands of dollars out your ass for. In Australia, you could just like hitch a ride with some sketchy dude with a laser in the back of his van and pay $10 at the gate, and then all of a sudden you'd be surrounded with gorgeous women with dreadlocks who were giving you LSD, and you would basically be in a kind of, you know, mystical magic fairyland with lasers and neon lights and sex and drugs and total anarchy, right? And you didn't even have to pay very much for it, right? And so at least, you know, this was kind of like what I did. This was the closest thing that I ever experienced, like Burning Man, right? And I didn't even go to very many of these parties, but at one such a party that was like this, there was you know, the year that I was there was one of the wetter years for Australia, right? And one of the things that happened during this unusually wet time was that some of these Psytrance parties, known by the local nomenclature as, or, you know, the local slang as bush doofs, you know, there were times when the weather would turn wet and the whole grounds would become very muddy, and people would be stuck in the mud, and you'd be stranded, and you were like, you're supposed to have left this party 2 days ago, but you'd just be stuck there hanging around with a bunch of weird Australian hippies in the middle of nowhere, right? But one of the things that people realized from these moments was that, well, here we have these guys who hunt ducks and stuff like that, who would associate with the idea of being a redneck. The idea of redneckism as such does not exist in Australia, but their own version of it they call Bogans, right? And the Bogan, like the American or the Canadian redneck, while we may judge them for having uncivilized attitudes towards the inclusion of diversity of other races and different cultures and things like that, we appreciate the rednecks and the Bogans in the sense that if you are stuck in the mud at the music festival, unless you have some kind of a way to affiliate yourself or to communicate with these kinds of people, you know, you may not have a way to get your vehicle out of the mud, right? And so this is what I'm trying to say is that we may not, as, you know, if we are trying to come up with your personal brand, you know, your identity, you know, who you are in the consumer corporate landscape, you may not identify yourself as somebody who would, you know, listen to Ted Nugent or wear a bass pro hat or, you know, any of these sort of signifiers, you know, of redneck white trash culture. But we should not devalue these people, because that's our whole, if you wanted to have a great time, you know, taking drugs and having lasers shot into your eyes, listening to shitty music in the middle of nowhere, it's only rednecks that make this possible, right? Because, you know, if without them, you'd just be stranded there in the mud. And I think that's very much what I'm aware of right now. And I have to also reflect on some of the things that have been going on in, you know, because I have to say that I've been somebody who perhaps I have to admit that I don't drive a vehicle, that one of the things which makes me feel somewhat alien from what you would call the redneck country lifestyle is that not only do I not know how to get your vehicle out of the mud, I don't even know how to drive it in the first place, right? So I would not, if I ended up at any of these places, I would probably maybe being smuggled in the boot of the car so I didn't have to pay to get in, or sneaking through the side gate of some place where you got in through with public transit, but to be a working man, to pay your way, and to also be able to pull other people out of the mud, something that I'm not familiar with at all, right? I'm just a freeloader. But the point is, what am I trying to say here? That we need these people, that our whole material existence, even if we decide that we've grown up, we put childish things behind us, we're not going to do Burning Man anymore, we're not going to have fun rave parties, that we're just going to be serious and go on serious camping trips with the family where there's not going to be none of this messing around, You still might get stuck in the mud and you still may need to pull yourself out of the mud, right? And because of this, I have been considering, for one thing, getting a driver's license, getting a car and that kind of thing. But the thing is, there's one thing that happened though that I live with my mother and we have this garage that has all this stuff that my dad, my dad's old stuff, my dad's old work area, right? And my dad was more of a guy who would do repair or do basic maintenance on cars. Maybe he didn't do all the mechanic work. Maybe he wasn't a total mechanic. But this is the kind of thing, there's my idea of the man who raised me and the kinds of things he did and how far I fall short of that. Because I don't know anything about cars. I don't know anything about tools, about building stuff and fixing things. I'm basically useless, right? And so my mother, with this in mind, my mother was deciding that she would clear out the garage full of all these things that are not being used. And she said, Dan, I'm going to take all these things that are like different kinds of oils and lubricants that are used for cars because clearly you don't drive and you're not going to, not only are you probably never going to drive, you're probably never going to have any mechanic ability, so we might as well give this stuff away. And she was also saying, you obviously aren't the kind of person who's going to be doing any, carpentry work or repairs or building things, so we may as well just get rid of all this stuff because as your mother I basically accepted that you were going to be useless the rest of your life, basically, right? So this is basically, we're with Mars opposite Neptune. I think it also sort of went with the transit in the sense that motor oils and things like that are the kind you don't want to just pour that down the drain because it's toxic and they're liquid, so it kind of goes with the eliminating quality of Mars and Virgo versus the toxic quality of Neptune and Pisces, and to just get rid of any sort of thing that would help a young man develop a sense of confidence and agency and appear with the other men or what manhood is supposed to represent as put forth in the environment by local culture of men who go out there to shoot ducks to prove themselves and all this kind of stuff, right? And then, so there's some other things I was thinking about saying about this. The difficulties of Neptune and Pisces and Saturn and Pisces and all this Earth stuff going on. I did notice today I took the dogs out for a walk in the morning as I usually did, and it is in fact back to school. There are a lot of parents taking their children for a walk, right? And this is the children are probably starting first grade or the different elementary school. There's a K to 12 school. No, elementary school, not K to 12, K to grade 7 elementary school in the neighborhood, which was this very elementary school that I went to the grades of 6 and 7, where I had my first forays into the public school system, and I made a bunch of friends, most of which who are now alienated from, and who I will now walk past the elementary school or walk past the houses of my old friends and feel bitter and alone and neglected because all the friends have left me and I am just here to watch parents take their children return to school and to realize that I'm basically have not progressed at all since being a kindergarten student, and that I'm basically a mental retard, and it has no hope of ever being a competent adult, right? But I am considering, though, that maybe I could go to college and go to university and all this kind of stuff and perhaps make something of myself. But the problem, anyways, is that my own sense of what I want to do in life is somewhat confused, because I don't really... The main interest that I have right now of why I would go back to school would be to take philosophy classes, to learn about people like, I don't know. You know, the thing is, I want to... Whatever. I'm thinking... I kind of am interested in continental philosophy, but there's only one college in the area, Douglas College, that has a continental philosophy program. But, you know, I don't know if there's any point in going to, like, a local college to learn about Plato or the classical philosophy, or, you know, it's just another thing to waste money on, because we live in a culture where what is valued is being able to fix cars, being able to pull people out of the mud when they get stuck, being able to provide the basic material existence that we, you know, to go on. And so there's a kind of a sense that, like, I do have I could just learn about this myself, you know, talk to people on the internet about it, or I could try to face the actual public academic system and try to, you know, formally make a name for myself as I don't know, a philosopher or something like that. And, you know, it's on my mind seeing this back to school thing, and not the having Mercury Cazimi on the same day the kids are going back to school. It kind of has, you know, maybe, I don't know, or maybe you might just take some more online classes. I don't know, right? I don't know, right? So anyways, just reflecting on what's been going on with the astrology, what I've seen in the news, what's going on in my local environment, right? And illuminating the collective psyche, or at least attempting to. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Please unsubscribe from my channel if you don't like it, and convince people to stay away from it, because it's probably a bad influence on society, and, you know, something that's better to be avoided. Or not. Or if you do like it, please like and subscribe. I don't know. Or you could tell me what you think. Thank you very much.